Here we go. We're at the final stage of the policy process and the final stage of this course. We're going to start with evaluation. And for this set, we have four slide decks to go through. The first just talks about what is evaluation, and then we'll discuss some social science approaches to evaluate public policy. And then in the other sets, we're going to get a bit more deeper into science, understanding the nature of reality, a bit of philosophy of science, and then kind of wrap it up with the focus on how do we really know that our public policies are achieving the goals that we want them to achieve? So let's go with the first one here. What is policy evaluation? It's a systematic inquiry into the program's merit, its worth, or its significance. We're looking at whether the observed changes can be attributed to the public policy, to chance, or to something else. What we're trying to do is research to learn to hold our government accountable and to improve our public policies. So the big question we ask is that did the program generate, or did the policy generate a significant and positive impact on its target population that would have not occurred otherwise? So what we're really seeing here is something similar to a hypothesis statement where you have this kind of significant but also positive impact, and it's focused on the target population, the people whose behavior we wanted to change, or whatever, and that is actually the result of the public policy rather than something else. So it matters because of stakeholders, and remember we discussed stakeholders as those who have some sort of stake in the public policy, in its success, in its failure, etc. And you can see a kind of list of those that we're thinking about here for the stakeholders. And we can think about public policy as kind of a systems lens, right? And so you have the inputs, what resources flowed in, what did the program do, the activities, the outputs, what are the immediate products, the short-term results, and the impact, the long-run effects, and then feedback. So this kind of notion of what came, what worked, what didn't work. So we can think about these evaluations as a series of scientific approaches, different evaluation designs that we can utilize here. We can have a before and after design, an after only design, a with and without approach, or a time series approach. Think back to a research methods class if you've had one, right? This is that kind of research design approach. And you have to go with the data that you have, the type of information that you want. And so let's talk about all four of these. So before and after is you are gathering data, observed outcomes before the program or policy is implemented. So this would be outcome at time 0. Then you would implement the policy and then take another measurement, outcome at time 1, post-program. And so you can see that change equals time 1 outcome minus time 0 outcome, and look at a policy is actually having an impact. After only, this looks at just what happens, data collected just after the implementation of the policy with no baseline, no before measurement. This is pretty much a kind of a weakest inference approach. It's cheap, it's fast. You don't have to do data on the front end. You collect data on the back end. With and without approach is like a treatment and control approach. This would be similar to how medical studies are done, right? So where you have a new drug come out and you gather a random sample of, say, 100 people, and you give half of them the drug and you give half of them a placebo or the sugar pill or something like that, and really see if there's an impact, a change in this kind of random assignment of groups and random assignment of treatment versus control, if that actual medicine is making a difference for whatever you're trying to figure out, right? Maybe it's a new heart pill and it's supposed to reduce some sort of protein or something like that, and you measure before those with and without with the treatment, right? And so you're looking at kind of generating counterfactuals when maybe in a policy situation, random assignment isn't actually feasible. So you're doing a policy experiment where you're giving the treatment or the policy program to certain groups and not giving it to others. And so you're kind of measuring on the back end there. The time series approach is you are doing like the before and after approach, but over a long period of time. So maybe you're taking a measure before the policy, and then you're taking a measure after the policy at time 1, and then a measure at time 2, maybe a few years down the road, measure at time 3, a few years more, measure time 4, right? And so you're kind of looking at trends, seasonalities, breaks, and the real kind of long-term impact of a public policy. So we can look at the kind of the comparison here. The before and after is pretty simple. You can eliminate confounding trends or spurious variables, right? Spurious relationships. After only is kind of has no baseline. It's just telling you what happened afterwards, but you can't really always pin it on the actual impact of the public policy itself. This is just kind of inference. With and without, you have developing a causal chain. You're having a comparable control group and time series. You're looking at gradual changes and effects over time. A kind of even more approach would be to combine the with and without with the time series. And so you have two groups that you're treating with the program and with the control, and you're measuring the change over time. Practitioner, the kind of key takeaway, right, is pick the design that is feasible given the constraints that you have. Maybe that's resource, maybe that's time, maybe that's whatever it may be, funding. Try to plan the evaluation before the rollout of the public policy, because if you're trying to lay it on afterwards, then that becomes expensive and more of a challenging when it comes to data. And mixed methods approaches work well because you're combining qualitative data with quantitative data. And so from here on out, we're going to skip into the kind of deep understanding of public policy and philosophy of science. So come back for the next one.